Hey cats and kitties, welcome to Simon Chardier's New York Stories. This next one, uh, this was inspired because Gary Matson sent me this thing that Henry Goldrich, who was the gentleman that owned and ran Manny's Music Store in New York City, and it was a giant music store. They sold like guitars, amps, basses, saxophones, trumpets, drums, PA systems, you name it. Synthesizers, Hammond B3s, pianos, Fender Rhodes. They sold everything, harmonicas, right? And it was like the biggest music store on 48th Street. And ever since I was a kid, a little kid even, I would go down 48th Street and just stare in all the windows at the guitars, like all of them, every kind of guitar, including guitars. This is a Les Paul Jr. I used to stare at these. You used to be able to get them down there. They used to be like $125 or whatever down there. But I started probably going down to 48th Street when I heard about it, when I was aware of it, probably like 1972, 71. And I used to go down there, and at that point there was Alex Axe. There was two We Buy Guitar stores. They had so many guitars. They had two stores. Then they had Sam Ash. Then they had Grayson Towns and Sam Ash and Manny's. So there was like 7 guitar stores just on that corner. And it was right around from the corner from the Metropole Cafe. It was like a strip club. And it was like the whole Times Square area in those days. You had like Orange Julius, which I guess was some kind of vanilla sugary protein powder and orange juice and ice in a blender. And then they gave it to you in this like cup. And they had skee ball and pinball. There was no video games yet. So you went in, you played pinball or skee ball with them wooden balls and everything. And then they had all the pornos all over the place and all the hookers, and all the guitar stores were right there, right? And also all the Broadway shows were right there. So uh, I used to go hang out at Manny's all the time. I would stare in the window at various guitars. I remember staring. They had a black Les Paul Custom, and I used to go down there and just stare at it. I couldn't buy it. I was a kid. I didn't have money. And then finally, many years later, I actually got me a black Les Paul Custom. And Henry, he used to throw me out of Manny's all the time. I used to go stare at everything, look at all the guitars, and I really didn't have any money to buy anything. So then he used to be like, kid, listen, if you're not going to buy anything, you got to go because like, you're taking up space in the store. And I was kind of fat back then, so I was taking up space, but he used to throw me out or whatever. But I would buy my strings down there. I actually did buy a couple of guitars down there. I had no money, so they were like $60 or $80 guitars. They weren't very good guitars. But they just had, it was like, holy shit. I would go in there and just stare, and then I would go into like Grayson Towns and stare at the giant stacks of high watts, just like the Who, or orange amps that were now they're everywhere. They're made in China. Back then they were made in England. They're very exotic amps, right? Like Hot Tuna used them, or high watts. High watts, like you couldn't play a high watt unless you were a rock star. Same thing with even a Les Paul or even a guitar like this. Like only rock stars had them, right? So, and then I used to go get thrown out of Manny's, so I'd go to We Buy Guitars, and I'd go play all the guitars in there, and then they would throw me out, right? Larry and his wife would throw me out, and Richie, the son, would throw me out of there. So then I went into Manny's, okay, and this is when I'm a little kid. I met Alice Cooper in Manny's. I'm in there in Manny's staring at all these guitars and staring at all the equipment and wishing I was a rock star. And I turned, and who's there? Alice Cooper. So I said hello to him. Because I loved Alice Cooper. I loved all that shit. Like, I'm 18 and school's out and all that shit, you know. And then one day I walk in and I'm staring at this really beat up, cheap guitar they have up there that they used to let people try out amps on. And I look, and right next to me is staring at the same guitar with the same look in his eye is Frank fucking Zappa. I met Frank Zappa. I said hello to him, and I talked to him, and he was very nice, you know. And then another time I was in there, I met Leslie West. He had a reputation for being very grouchy, Leslie West, but he was very nice to me, and he was one of my guitar heroes. And me and him was both fat. Like, he was Leslie West, the great Fatsby, right? So me and him was fat, but he was so cool. He even offered to buy me a guitar, but back in those days, my mother told me that all musicians were drug addicts and preverts, and so I didn't take him up on it. I just was like, well, thanks, but, you know, I don't think my parents would let me do that, you know. And then another time I was in Times Square, and this fucking guy comes over to me, and he's wearing like a trench coat, and he's like this old guy with like balding hair and bad teeth, and he goes up, "Hi, young boy, how are you?" And he puts his arm around my shoulder, and he puts his hand on the back of my neck, and I could smell his breath. It was bad. And he's like, "Where are you going?" And he had a trench coat. And I was like, "Oh, I'm going to meet my dad. My dad's across the street. He's a cop." And the guy like let me go, and I ran across the street into traffic to get away from this fucking guy. So so I was sad to hear that, you know, Henry Goldrich died, you know, because that was like the real old New York, you know, like rock star guitar stores, man, you know. And I'm proud to say he threw me out of his fucking stores so many times. He was like, "Oh, there," you know, after a while, it was like, "Oh, there he is again." I'm proud to have been thrown out of Manny's many, many times, you know. But I actually did buy guitars at We Buy Guitars. As a matter of fact, I still have everything I ever bought from them. I got it. Uh, and the other story, it's a New York story. It's a little bit not connected to that, to 48th Street, but I met John Lennon in 1977 when I was living in the back of my dad's doctor's office. I was on the Upper West Side, and I'm walking down a street between Central Park West or Columbus, right, kind of near Dakota we lived in. There is John fucking Lennon and Yoko, and he's wearing the white suit, like the kind of suit that he wore in Abbey Road cover, and I just went up to him and I was like, "Hey John, how you doing? I live around here too. Welcome to the neighborhood." And I shook his hand and he was like, "Hello, nice to meet you." I was like, "Nice to meet you too, John. Have a good day." And I fucked off, you know. I didn't want to be like bugging him, you know. But so I got to meet John Lennon too in the fucking street. No security guards, no nothing. That's why he got killed. Because he just walked around like it was nothing to worry about, you know. So those are my New York stories for today. 48th Street.